since 2016. Started in Miami. Discussions of truth. For years, I started with Seek and Destroy, Metallica. And anyway, that's just how I started my podcasts. Check them out. I mean, I've interviewed G. Edward Griffin, interviewed David Icke, interviewed Paul Hellyer. If you don't know who that was, definitely investigate, read up on who Paul Hellyer was. He passed away a number of years ago in his 90s. A Canadian politician, flat out said that there were extraterrestrials on this planet that he knew about. I mean, he's in his 90s, and anyway, I mean, I don't really get into aliens and extraterrestrials. I focus on the money. I came across, I was exposed to what was called the Zika virus. And by the way, the orientation of this, I'm going to try to fix it, but I've got it in landscape mode because that's the holder I have for the tripod. So it's obviously twisted, I think, at the moment, but again, I'll try to fix that in the other 3 installments of this Brennan letter. But I began researching, because of the Zika virus, I began researching that led me to the Rockefeller Foundation, that was funding scientists in the Uganda forest in Africa, hence the name, the Zika virus, the Zika forest. This is before the COVID fiasco, pandemic garbage that the globalists laid out on poor 7 billion folks that inhabit the planet. That is total hogwash, by the way. I mean, it's part of their economic reset, the stages, and it was primarily, I think, it was released to keep Trump out of the White House, right? It was to set up that 2020 rigging. That's really, I think, why it was used. But and if you've been injected with the vaccine against your desire, I'm sorry. You know, I was very vocal during those years, doing the best I could to travel with General Flynn and Clay Clark and the hundreds and hundreds of people that were working with those folks. I was doing my podcast, self-funding, working hard to kind of expose this fraud to the American people. And, thank goodness for Clay Clark. Thank goodness because he was, from what I understand, and maybe I don't know at all, but he was the megaphone for that movement. Anyway, I prior to getting involved with Clay Clark, I had already been exposed to a little bit of the voter fraud that was going to come Trump's way, because I had the Google whistleblower on my podcast. Zach Voorhees. The book is Google Leaks. You can get it on Amazon right now. I recommend it, of course. Zach's become a friend of mine over the years, and he and I were very successful in getting to the president's daughter, Tiffany, and alerting her of the fraud coming her dad's way. And we had a brief encounter with President Trump, October 15th, 2020, in Doral, Miami. And that was, of course, that was before the COVID. The COVID lockdowns were just around the corner. If I've got that right, maybe they'd already hit. Yeah, they had already hit. They had come that prior spring is really when things got really messy, right? Because that makes sense. Okay. So I think it was, it may have, the first case of the COVID thing, the bat may have been like fall in Wuhan, right? Was that October of 2019? And then it was that following spring that it really started to affect things here in the U.S. It became this kind of pandemic. And right, okay, so yeah, because I can remember Secret Service wearing masks. Trump was not masked. But I remember his Secret Service, people were masked. It was crazy, man. It's like, dude, why are you wearing this mask? I mean, and shout out to, talking about the people that were working with Clay, and then Clay started doing his stuff after that. But I want to mention Josh Yoder, because Josh was an American Airlines pilot that was very vocal. He and another group of pilots, small group. And if you think that you can't make a difference, you're wrong. I'm just telling you right now, you were wrong. You can make a difference. But if you think you can't, and you don't try it, then you're not going to, obviously. And the reason that there was this huge pushback, United Airlines was like the worst, but the reason with American and I think Southwest, there was this availability to board those planes without being masked. Because the whole FCC, I think, was pushing and trying to regulate mask wearing for anybody traveling on any plane, which is tyrannic. I mean, this is insanity. It's insanity if you understand what they were trying to do to people and using a health scare, which is what it was. Okay, there was nothing more severe than that virus, than cold and flu-like symptoms, which is what we experienced in Miami back in 2016 with the Zika virus. That's what led me to start the podcast, right? So kind of roundabout way, I got into looking through follow the money, right? So always follow the money. People do everything. That's why they live life, is for money. It just is. And so you either, it's just money makes the world go round is the word, the phrase, right? You don't do anything without money. I can't talk to you right now if I haven't paid my bills, right? So money is everything. So follow the money. So people can commit crimes for money, right? People make these decisions based off of money. People get married for money, right? Whatever it may be, but follow the money. So if you want answers, in my view, to lead you down a road of accuracy or truth, follow the money. And so I followed the money with the Rockefeller and the Zika thing, and it led me to this guy named Anthony Sutton. And he wrote a book in this. It was in the 70s, I believe. Maybe it wasn't in the 70s, but he was working with the Stanford Hoover Institute in the 70s when he was talking about the fraud with the Bush family. That's Prescott Bush funding the Nazi regime. So this might be the first time you've heard that. Corruption goes, much further than Obama, and we're talking about Prescott Bush. We're talking about World War II. And by the way, if you think that the United States is this clean, perfect, squeaky dude, no. There's been what is this, 47 now? Trump's number 47. One president has left office without being in debt, or his government being in debt. That would be Andrew Jackson, that saw the threat of the European banks and he fought against it. Kill the bank is literally his slogan, I believe. Kill the banks. He's the only president that this country has ever had that hasn't had a debt. I mean, if that doesn't astonish you, I don't know what does. But the Federal Reserve conspiracy, the Federal Reserve was passed into law by Woodrow Wilson in 1913. It's called the Federal Reserve Act. Sutton wrote a book called The Federal Reserve Conspiracy, which shows the ties. I haven't looked at it in a while, but it shows the ties through the British East Indies Company, the Skull and Bones Society, which is nothing more than the Illuminati, which are a secret society. And so you have to ask yourself, why are they working in the shadows? What are they doing? Why are they doing it? For money. So who's controlling their money, right? Follow those strings. And I was just on a phone call this morning talking, people are talking about the City of London. The City of London controls the monarchy. The monarchy is subservient to a bank. That bank is basically in the City of London, and that's where the Rothschild control all of their finances, are through the City of London. And people will say, well, the Bank of England is not controlled by the Rothschild. Well, I would argue with that. I would argue with that. And here's a classic example. And the reason I'm talking about the city of London is because the Rothschild controlling the British East Indies Company. Elihu Yale was a shareholder of the British East Indies Company in the colonies. He started Yale University, and that created that society, that hidden society, where there are secrets, if you will, called Skull and Bones, which is what the Bushes were in. I believe the Rockefeller had tied to that. President Taft was in that, and then even in the Trump administration, you have Wilbur Ross. Wilbur Ross he's the guy that bailed Trump out of the Taj Mahal bankruptcy issue in Atlantic City. That's 1990. He's an N.M. Rothschild agent banker. Okay, Wilbur Ross. Yeah, I mean, these. I'm just telling you. If you think these are all conspiracy theories, I would urge you to drop the theory. There is and are conspiracies. There's the main conspiracy is to bring down this country, and that's a foreign entity. The deep state is a foreign entity. You bring it down. You implement communism. You swallow it up by and communism is nothing more than an economic agenda to run a country. I can get into that another time, but I wanted to get into finishing this letter for you. So Anthony Sutton, former Stanford Hoover fellow, they threatened, as he was talking about the Prescott Bush financing the Hitler's side of the war. They threatened to fire him. He walked away from the Hoover Institute, and I believe that's what set him on the trail to write that book called The Federal Reserve Conspiracy, flushing out the skull and bones, with trying to Chris Mulligan runs that, and that's actually who I still have. It's not void. A contract to print my first book with Trottier. It hasn't been printed. This is my second book. Sutton published with Trottier, with Mulligan, and that's kind of what started. That's what got me going and talking about the fraud in the government. So, and to rehash so you understand what I'm doing here with this installment is, I was approached by a former FBI agent that delivered a binder to me. It was an aggregation of his research on criminal crimes committed by John Brennan, who served as the various offices, but most notably the director of the CIA. In 2000, that was in 2024 when I met him. In 2021, he circulated a 25-page letter to various news outlets that didn't do anything with his work. Well, once I found his work in 2024, I turned it into a book. Okay, and I'm pushing it very hard. I'm pushing it as hard as I can because according to the research in the book, which again yes, it's my book. I've authored it. There are components of the book that are mine, but the majority of the information has come from a former FBI agent. And it shows that Mr. Brennan has committed some very heinous crimes on the country. And that would be your country, right? That would be your taxpayer dollars that paid for those crimes. So I am concluding the letter, which is a 25-page letter that came my way and was distributed. I don't know exactly who John sent it to, but I can tell you it was sent at least. It may have been sent to Alex Jones. I don't know. But it was definitely sent to Sonar 21, Larry Johnson, who's a former CIA agent. And again, Larry's told me that he thought it was a setup. It was a hoax. Well, I'm telling you right now, it's not a hoax. It's the real deal. It really happened. I've got literally actually just a page to read for this final installment, and it's the conclusion, the takeaways of what's important to understand regarding the contents of the book. And you can buy it right now on Amazon. I urge you to do so. Buy a copy for yourself. Buy it for your husband. Buy it for your wife. Buy it for your kid. Have your kid take it to school. Give it to their teacher. Take it to your boss. Give it to your employees, whatever your capacity is. Have your mayor read the book. Buy it for your congressman. I spent a week in D.C., over a week in D.C., distributing over 100 copies of this to offices in the House and the Senate. Self-financed, guys. I mean, and I'm a carpenter by trade. Yeah, I'm what you call I'm just what you call a middle class guy, if you will. Nothing special about me, but I have been dedicating myself to this work for 10 years. And like Ray McGovern told me, who used to brief Bush, as a matter of fact, and he rejected my offer to write a foreword to this, and that's up to him. I honor that. Ray McGovern joined my podcast when I was doing it out of Miami, and he said, Ian, he said people like you are the last breath of hope. Is not what he said, but to something of that extent, the last breath of hope for any type of freedom in media in this country. Because if you know anything about the media, it all basically runs through and is regulated by the Council on Foreign Relations. And I've talked a little bit about that in the past. So, in the book, Roger Stone has written the foreword. You've likely heard his name, and he's 50 years in D.C. Roger Stone's written the foreword, and as a matter of fact, he's has said that it is one of the most important and shocking books he has read in his 50 years in politics. So Roger Stone's written the foreword. Brooks Agnew, who's a former speechwriter for Alan Keyes, he's African American Princeton grad that's ran for president a number of times. And Alan Keyes is a great guy too. If you're not familiar with his work, he's phenomenal. I've been on his show. And the other thing is the third forward of the book is former CIA agent, whistleblower, as a matter of fact, John Kiriakou. So all three of these men taking their time and know that they were not paid. I didn't have any money to offer them, so the only money that was expended to get this in print was from me to pay for the edits, the editor, and the legal vetting. And of course, at that point, then the publisher. I don't know what they outside of the editing and kind of the startup fees. I don't know what else that they pay for, but that's up to them. It's not something I've asked them about. But as a startup author, it cost me X amount of dollars to get this even to the public, and even paying for that didn't guarantee that it got into circulation. This is very strenuous. It's very difficult. It's nothing short of Herculean effort, miraculously. To get this into print because their lawyer advised them to just axe it. I'm just telling you that their lawyer the publisher's lawyer advised them to axe it. So major kudos to Postal Press and their executive department, their office, for saying nope. We're going to push through. We're going to release this. And the first day it came out in July, I joined Steve Bannon. War Room. Natalie Winters was the one interviewing. Steve was in the field, and he called in. He says this is the most miraculously timed release of a book in the history of publishing. It's the exact quote he said, because that day Trump was in the Oval Office with the Filipino president calling Obama out for treason. And I'm telling you right now, I'm going to tell you right now, and I've met Trump. I haven't spoke to him like this. I haven't spoken to him directly, but I graced his presence. He approached me, came up to me. We didn't shake hands. He did have some nice things to say about me. He made a nice comment. But I will tell you right now that the executive office itself is compromised. That is my gut, and I can't tell you exactly who in the office. And outside of it being compromised by the strings attached to the Federal Reserve, right, which economically control the strings of the government. I can't tell you exactly where that compromisation is coming from. My guess, it's through possibly a tie through this, what I mentioned as Wilbur Ross and N.M. Rothschild. But that office itself is in danger. And he's receiving some very bad advice. And I don't personally have anything against any of his people in his administration. And I don't know exactly where the bad advice is coming from, but he's clearly receiving some very bad advice. And I just, one of the things I'll point out before I finish this installment, one of the things I'll point out, folks, is the Charlie Kirk assassination. Think about it here. And I know it's probably very difficult for Erica to even talk about it, but she's talking about it. I don't know that I could be if I was in her position. It'd be very, very difficult. I've lost loved ones, and it's not easy, and it takes months to recover. But I will tell you that the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald is who we are told killed the president, John F. Kennedy, and that's part of the Warren Commission, and that's what we've been led to believe, and that's what we've allowed ourselves to go with. And I say allowed because it's not been disproven for over 60 years is disgusting. And that means complacency. That means not enough Americans are doing the work to sacrifice their comfort to push that government back. Okay? And the same thing. And I spent 5 hours on the phone with Judith Vary Baker, and she's written a book about, it's called Me and Lee, I believe it's called. She knew Oswald intimately, was his girlfriend. You talk to that woman, I haven't read the book, but you talk to that woman, you know he was a patsy. And in fact, a good friend of mine, he's now 80, Mark Shaw, is a former guest on my show. Mark Shaw has just released, a few weeks ago, a book called Abuse of Power. And Abuse of Power shows Sirhan Sirhan was a patsy. And that's a man that spent over 60 years in prison. Okay, so for anyone to say that Trump's not compromised, I disagree with. And for anyone that's going with the narrative, which just sounds, like Kash Patel is going with this whole narrative. He's not pushing back. Valhalla, what's Valhalla, man? Give me a break. Nobody's pushing back against, and again, there's that Yale link with Vance, right? No one's pushing back with the narrative of this Robinson kid. I mean, dude, that's a military scale operation, as far as I'm concerned. And I never served in the military. I'm a peaceful person, but I believe in self-defense. And I've obviously shot guns. I mean, that's an American right. It's something I was raised on. And I will tell you that I just disagree, totally disagree with the narrative that we're giving through the FBI and the CIA is involved in that. I mean, this kid, I'm gonna call it out. My guess is that he's a patsy. Rob Reiner, I mean, killed by his. Here's another thing, and Reiner is directly tied into this whole Brennan debacle. Okay, he's not mentioned in the book, but there's a 2017 interview of him interviewing Brennan and Clapper. He was part of that Russian collusion cover-up, the hoax. Okay, Rob Reiner was, and I love his movies, and he's an incredible cinematic talent. But he was part of that very liberal agenda that's corroding the walls of our political capital, the institutions in that capital. I'm not saying that his son didn't kill his father, the father, and the wife and mother. But what I'm saying is, it's very possible that he was MK Ultra. Okay, I mean, this is real. This is real stuff. These aren't theories. The more you dig into them, the more you dig into them, the more you find evidence that supports. And the conspiracy theory is a term that came after JFK was assassinated by the CIA, because they didn't want people like me, like you. They didn't want everyday citizens pushing back against the Dulles narrative. It's Alan Dulles, and it was controlling, and the people controlling Dulles, the Warren Commission. That's what that is. They don't want people questioning the mainstream narrative, the main narrative. Don't question it. Why not? because it's inaccurate, because there's falsities in it, because there's gaps in it, there's untruths in it, right? Because it's dishonest. So yeah, don't question, don't question whether or the Kirk was there's a cover up there, right? Just be a good obedient servant and go along with the Tyler Robinson narrative, Cash. I mean, give me a break, dude. Give me a break. No, so. People in the Trump administration, I don't have any personal dislike for them. I do dislike that they're not getting anything done, but I'm not in their position, so I don't know what's happening. I will tell you right now, Kash Patel needs to wake up. He needs to wake up, dude, big time. And Pam Bondi, who I've met before, and she's very sweet and very nice woman. Dude, she's got to She's got to put some brass knuckles on, if you will. Hypothetically is what I'm speaking of. I'm not saying actually put brass knuckles on, but she's got to get work done. She's got to do work, and whoever is ill advising Trump in regards to, and they're likely tied into King Charles and the Rothschilds somehow, some way. I'm telling you right now that they are. I'm telling you that right now. He needs, dude. Trump needs to. He needs to tighten up his belt, because the people he thinks he can trust, he can't. Okay, and I'm not saying that. I'm not saying who that is. I'm not saying it's J.D. Vance. I'm not saying it's Susie Wiles. I'm not saying who that is, because I don't know. I don't know. I'm just sitting back and I'm looking at what's being accomplished and nothing's getting done. So that means it's up to people like you and it's up to people like me. That's who's going to force the hand. That's who's going to force the hand. So anyway, it's disgusting. It's disgusting what has been allowed to happen and transpire in this country. The greatest country ever created by civilization, the human being, ever, period, no doubt about it. But it is sinking fast. Opening your borders, Joseph Robinette Biden, opening your borders so that your country can be flooded with criminals, with drugs, with weapons. I spent a week. I was down on the border. I don't know. It wasn't exactly a week. It was a number of days, though. I toured a ranch, and then I spent time on the border during Biden being in office. It was actually just before I met the man that gave me the contents that created this book. No, you're not going to come in. I mean, it's insanity. Okay, so you have to step back and you have to understand it's all being ran and orchestrated by the United Nations. Yeah, there's other corporations, there's other governments, there's other entities involved in that. But that's where you have to kind of step back and you have to look at, okay, well, wait a second. Why am I getting censored online if I post something that Twitter doesn't like, or Facebook, or I mean, that's freedom of speech, right? And if you haven't been censored yet, well, I mean, good for you. I mean, at this day and age, I mean, who hasn't been censored one way or the other? You need regulation. That's one thing, but it's totally out of hand. In my opinion, it's totally out of hand. And again, the more you start to dig into it, the more you realize there's a cover-up. Wool has been placed over your eyes, and you can make that decision. Obviously, it's your freedom. It's your life. You can make the decision to step back and just say, I'm not going to care. I'm just going to flip on the tube every night, watch my favorite show, eat my dinner, do my thing. Whether you hug your kids or your husband or your wife, you go to your 9 to 5, and you can step back and just say that and say, okay, yeah, I'm just going to hunker down, and I'm not going to allow it to affect me. I'm not going to allow it to affect me until, until maybe you lose a loved one in one of the Twin Towers, right? Or you lose a loved one that was running a marathon, a bomb exploded, right? That's when it's going to hit home. And when that happens, when it affects you directly and it hits home, well, at that point it's maybe it'll just simply be too late. So, and again, hey, yeah, maybe the work that I'm doing is ineffective. I can tell you right now, it is effective. I'm one person. I'm making a difference. You are no different. You are one person, and you can make a difference. So make a difference. Okay, so that's enough for my soapbox there. Anyway, drop the theory. There's a conspiracy. They did not like the Mayflower setting sail. I can tell you that right now. They did not like that. They did not like Washington. Now, here's another thing before I conclude here. Here's another thing. You talk about Washington crossing the Delaware. He and his wife owned shares in the British East Indies Company, Rothschild controlled, that was funding King George. So The City of London's funding both sides of the American Revolution in that sense. Those weren't the only sources of finance for those armies, but you talk about an oxymoron. And George Washington is the greatest. I mean, he's the greatest patriot of all, right? But where did his financing come from? I mean, and what I just told you is a Harvard publication. And that flag, the Star Spangled Banner, the 13 stripes, that's based off of what's called the U.S. Grand Union flag. What's the U.S. Grand Union flag based off of? None other than the British East Indies Company flag. Look at the flag that John Paul Jones flew on the USS Alfred on the Delaware. Look at that flag, and you type it right out in your Google search engine. It's called the U.S. Grand Union flag. You type that up. Type up what the British East Indies Company flag. They are identical. Because that's the flag. That's the flag of the finance. The people that paid for the ship. The people that paid for the cannons. And it's not England. It's London, which is a sovereign nation that controls the monarch. Yeah, so if you're in England and you're listening to this, you should be wickedly upset. A system that's been running in your country since 1066. Yes, indeed. William the Conqueror. He conquered the British Isles, but he was unable to conquer Londinium, the Roman banking center. So, anyway, the conclusion to the letter. It's John Donovan is the author of this. He's my FBI. He's a former FBI agent. He's the source of the information that's presented in the book that you can buy and you'll read when you get it on Amazon. He wrote a letter that circulated to independent news sources in 2021, 3 years before I met him. It's a synopsis, basically, of his findings. And this is installment number 4, and here's the conclusion to that letter. The preponderance of the evidence proves, 1, John Owen Brennan and others unknown set up a CT Intel info monopoly. I'll repeat that. CT Intel info monopoly, a counterterrorism intelligence information monopoly in the form of the NCTC, which is the National Counterterrorism Center, that relied on an indispensable government contractor, and that was known as the Analysis Corporation. Counterterrorism intel info monopoly. 2, John Owen Brennan retired from U.S. government service to become President Barack Obama, or Barry Soetoro, and Scratch that. Brennan retired from U.S. government service to become the president and CEO of the indispensable government contractor, the Analysis Corporation. 3, Brennan arranged the sale of the indispensable government contractor, the Analysis Corporation, to an investor so that the indispensable government contractor, the Analysis Corporation, could be spun off in an initial public offering, IPO. Brennan got stock in the indispensable government contractor. 4, the CT Intel info monopoly logically enabled John Brennan and others unknown at the indispensable government contractor to have advanced knowledge of at least 2 pending terror attacks, and this advanced knowledge was withheld from appropriate U.S. intelligence authorities, i.e. FBI, CIA. 5, the information withheld by the CT Intel info monopoly resulted in successful attacks on U.S. and allied nation citizens. 6, the successful attacks induced the U.S. government to spend billions of dollars in excess funds to prevent similar attacks in the future. 7, the additional spending resulted in at least $2.2 billion in funding to the indispensable government contractor, the Analysis Corporation. 8, John Brennan filed 4 false official statements in the form of financial disclosure forms that hid his proprietary ownership of the indispensable government contractor, in violation of conflict of interest laws. 9, John Brennan was able to increase the value of his proprietary ownership in the indispensable government contractor from approximately 150,000 to 2.1 million in November 25th of 2009, and then increased the 2.1 million to 4.85 million in April 4th of 2011 as a result of his hidden ownership. John Brennan and others set up a counterterrorism intelligence information monopoly, CT Intel Info Monopoly, resting on the foundation of an indispensable government contractor, used the worldwide reach of the NSA to identify a suitable terror candidate they would allow to succeed, then use the CT Intel Info Monopoly to prevent any other intelligence or law enforcement agency from gathering enough facts to stop the terror candidate. Logically, they would have to have a few terror candidates in the queue because some cop on the street may just stumble upon any particular terror candidate during the terror candidate's preparatory activity. Then Brennan et al. Waited like vultures in the trees. The terror candidate attacks, recriminations are expressed, the public clamors for protection, and increased funding is showed on the indispensable government contractor. The increased funding increases the value of their stock holdings. Brennan et al. Reaped the benefit like vultures, swooping down to feast on the dead because Brennan et al. Owned the indispensable government contractor. And that concludes the letter. And again, I'm trying to change the format so I can print this so you're able to read this and circulate it. Right now it's in a format I tried to get a PDF version but it's not working. So I'm trying to get this letter out so I can publish it for you to have a link to it. But that is the fourth installment to the John Brennan letter from my intel source, Mr. John Donovan, former FBI agent, spent over a decade in the FBI, serving in the Washington, D.C. Bureau. Folks, I appreciate you listening to me. And just look, it's up to you, me, others to get this information out. So good luck, and God bless America.